Bellows dies. Amaganatimirandasya Gananjana Salakaya Chaksurun Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Jena Bhutale. Computer stuff. Mayam Rupagada Mayam Nadati Swapadantikam Mandeham Sri Guru Sri Juta Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Sri Rupam Sagala Jatam Sahagana Ragana Janvitam Sang Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitangscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhano Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakapachubhascha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Narayanam Namaskritya
Naranam Namaskritya
Niramachaiva Narotamam
Naranam
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam
Vitodaye Mudidayet
Jayam Vidayam
Nastapreshu Badreshu Nityam Bhagavat Shevaya Bhagavad Uttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavati Naistiki. Today, Thursday, March 20th, 2025. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Creation of the Fourth Order. Chapter 27, Attack by Chandavega on the city of King Varanjana and the character of Kalakanya. Imagine that, Chandavega. That sounds like a bad guy, doesn't it? Yes. But we will find out that Chandavega is attacking all of us. So this is text number 12. Yuktesh evam pramatasya kuntumba sakta chetasaha asasada sabaikalo yo priya yoshitam yukteshvevam pramatasya kutumba sakta chetasaha asasada sabaikalo yo priya yoshitam Yutesh evam pramatasya kutumba sakta chetasaha asasada sabaikalo jo priya yoshitam
Yuteshvevam pramatasya
kutumba sakta chetasaha asasada sabaikalo yo priya yoshitam
Pramatasya
Yudeshevam Pramatasya
Kutamastaka Chetasaha
Kutumbasakta Chetasaha
Sabaikalo
Asasara Sabaikalo Yo Priya Priya Yoshitam
Yuteshvevam Pramatasya
Yuteshvevam Pramatasya
Sakta Chetasaha
Kutumbasakta Chetasaha
Sasara Sabaikalo
Asasara Sabaikalo
Priya Priya Yoshitam
Yo Priya Priya Yoshitam
Yudeshvevam Pramatasya
Yuteshvevam Pramatasya Kutumbasakta Chetasaha Asasara Sabaikalo Jo Priya Priya Yoshitam. The synonyms. Please repeat. Yukteshu,
Yukeshu
to beneficial activities.
beneficial activities.
Evam,
Evam
thus.
thus.
Pramatasya,
Pramatasya
being inattentive.
being attentive.
Kutumba,
Kutumba
to kith and kin.
to get and kin.
Asakta,
Asaka
attached.
attached.
Chetasaha,
Chetasaha
consciousness.
consciousness.
Asasada,
Asasada
arrived.
arrived.
Saha,
Saha
that.
that.
Vai,
Vai
certainly.
certainly.
Kalaha,
Kala
time.
time.
Yaha,
Yaha
which.
which.
Apriya,
Apriya
not very pleasing.
not very pleasing.
Priya Yoshitam,
Yoshitam
for persons attached to women.
or persons attached to women.
Translation by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Thus, King Puranjana, being attached to fruitive activities, karma kandiya, as well as kith and kin, and being obsessed with polluted consciousness, eventually arrived at that point, not very much liked by those who are overly attached to material things. We can guess what that is. Death. That's that point. Thus, King Puranjana,
Thus King Puranjana
being attached to fruitive activities,
being attached to fruitive activities.
karma kandiya,
Karma kandiya
as well as kith and kin,
as well as kin and kin.
and being obsessed with polluted consciousness,
Being obsessed with polluted consciousness.
eventually arrived at that point,
Eventually arrived at that point.
not very much liked by those
Not very much liked by those
who are overly attached
who are overly attached
to material things.
to material things.
In the enlightening purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. In this verse, the words Priya Yoshitam and Apriyaha are very significant. The word Yoshit means woman, and Priya means dear or pleasing. Death is not very much welcome for those who are too much attached to material enjoyment, which culminates in sex. There is an instructive story in this connection. Once, when a saintly person was passing on his way, he met a prince, the son of a king, and he blessed him, saying, "My dear prince, may you live forever." The sage next met a saintly person and said to him, "You may either live or die." Some benediction, huh? Eventually, the sage met a brahmachari devotee, and he blessed him, saying, "My dear devotee, you may die immediately." What? Finally, the sage met a hunter, and he blessed him, saying, "Neither live nor die." The point is that those who are very sensual and are engaged in sense gratification do not wish to die. Generally, a prince has enough money to enjoy his senses. Therefore, the great sage that he should live forever, For as long as he lived, he could enjoy life. But after his death, he would go to hell. Since the brahmachari devotee was leading a life of severe austerities and penances in order to be promoted back to Godhead, the sage said that he should die immediately so that he need not continue to labor hard and could instead go back home, back to Godhead. The saintly person may either live or die, for during his life he is engaged in serving the Lord, and after his death he also serves the Lord. Thus, this life and the next are the same for a saintly devotee, for in both he serves the Lord. Since the hunter lives a very ghastly life due to killing animals, and since he will go to hell when he dies, he is advised to neither live nor die. Kind of like a purgatory sort of thing. King Puranjana finally arrived at the point of old age. In old age, the senses lose their strength. And although an old man desires to enjoy his senses, and especially sex life, he is very miserable because his instruments of enjoyment no longer function. Such sensualists are never prepared for death. They simply want to live on and extend their life by so-called scientific advancement, or the blue pill. Some foolish Russian scientists also claim that they're going to make man immortal through scientific advancement. Under the leadership of such crazy fellows, civilization is going on. Cruel death, however, comes and takes all of them away, despite their desire to live forever. This type of mentality was exhibited by Hiranyakashipu, but when the time was ripe, the Lord personally killed him within a second. Great stuff here. Yukte Shevam Pramatasya Kutumba Saptachetasah Asasada Savai Kalo Jo Priya Jo Shitam. Thus King Puranjana, being attached to fruitive activities, karma kandiya, as well as kith and kin, and being obsessed with polluted consciousness, eventually arrived at that point not very much liked by those who are overly attached to material things. Mukum karoti bachalam pangam lagayate girim satkripa tamaham bande paramananda madhavam vasigurum madinatarinam. So pretty much down to the last man, woman, and child, everyone is attached to sense gratification. And therefore, nobody wants to die. That is, you could say, that is the human condition. When we say condition, we mean the conditioned soul. That's the condition of the conditioned soul. There was a song back in the 60s. I just dropped in to see what condition my condition was in. So our condition is that we are conditioned, unfortunately. And therefore, the prospect of death, it is a daunting prospect. And for the most part, people don't want to think about it. They just want to put it out of their minds. Prabhupada calls that the philosophy of eat, drink, be merry, and enjoy, for tomorrow we may die. And no one knows when their death is coming, but everyone knows it's coming, but nobody wants to talk about it, and no one wants to think about it. But when I was a teenager, we, myself and my brothers, jumped in the van and drove 100 miles to see my old grandfather, they had finally gotten him into an old age facility, and he was probably about 80. And he had smoked cigarettes since he was like 10 years old. And he didn't go to school much beyond 10 either. And he had worked his whole life. He was a carpenter, and he was an alcoholic. And, pretty sad state of affairs, really. Definitely not from a Brahminical family, I'll tell you that. And so he was sitting there. We went to see him in this old age home, and he used to roll his own cigarettes by hand, old school. And he was still smoking, even then, although he had emphysema. And, if he hadn't smoked, he probably would have lived to be like 150. But he had smoked for 70 years, so it was finally catching up to him. And he said to us, we were just teenagers, he said, I just wanted to see you boys one last time before I die. And I was struck by that because he certainly was facing his own mortality, and being in the old age home, you got plenty of time to sit around and think about it. It's coming. You're on death's doorstep. And then many years later, my mother was like 85, almost 86, and her time was just about up. And so she was bedridden and in the bed, and then the nursing assistants would come and like change her diaper and stuff like that. It's like a little baby. And they have the system there. They have it together in these facilities. They have a kitchen and a cafeteria, and then they bring food to the patients who are stuck in the bed. And my mother said, I'm going to die right here in this bed, and I'm just going to eat myself to death. Like, wow. She had a good grasp of what was going on. With her, she knew the end was near. And so instead of like prepare for death, it's like, okay, I'm just going to keep eating. And then whatever they bring me, whatever the nursing assistants bring me, then I'll eat that. And if I want something, I'll ask for it. And then my stepbrother was kind of managing her finances and stuff. And so he arranged to have, she had a couple of bottles of wine there in the room and the TV. And then this way I'm happily drinking the wine, eating, watching the TV, and just waiting. And death will come, which it did. So this is not very astonishing in one sense. It's just common, and that's what happens. Therefore, the system we have in this country is that we stick the old people away, warehouse them, so to speak, and give them some sense gratification to hang on to until the very moment of death. And then that's it. No self-realization whatsoever. Isn't that so sad? But that's the system. You can contrast that to the system in other places, in other countries. For example, one devotee was telling me about some devotees he knew, I won't mention their names, in Mayapur, and they had a little house, and you go over to the house and you visit them, and there's the grandfather dying on the couch. And it was just like a fact of life. Yes, this is the grandfather here. He's dying on the couch. He will be gone soon. And then eventually the man, the head of the household, he will die on that couch too. And it's okay. Everyone dies. You don't have to spend a ton of money to send them somewhere. You just right there on the couch in the living room. That's it. I was very struck by that. And the devotee who told me this, his name is Balabhadra Bhattacharya. Very funny and self-realized devotee. For many years was temple president in Atlanta. And Balabhadra said, You're just dying there, right there on the couch, like no problem. And it was a good lesson for me in self-realization to hear that, and having seen my grandfather, and then later on my mother. So death is everywhere. So someone recently asked me, someone who is a friend of the temple, but not really a committed devotee, and who has a lot of doubts about Vedic knowledge and doesn't have much of a reservoir of faith in Krishna consciousness. He said, "How's it going, Dhiro?" I said, "Well, it's going pretty good, aside from birth, death, old age, and disease. Because we see it all around us. Most of us feel that birth is not a problem, unless you're, a young person of childbearing age, then it could be an impending issue. But otherwise, we're not worried about our next birth too much. And we already passed that portion, that 25% of the fourfold miseries of life. But old age and disease and death, if you survive long enough, they will come and get you. And then it is also that old age, disease, and death, they kind of crowd you up at the end there, kind of gang up on you. And so the spirit remains within the soul, because the soul, he doesn't think I'm old. Although he may be thinking I'm this body. He thinks, I want to enjoy. Why does he think like that? Because he's eternal. So the concept of death, no, I don't want to die. I'm not going to die. I just want to enjoy forever. What was that? The devotees had a flyer in the 1960s at 26 Second Avenue. Stay high forever. Because everyone was, at that time in the culture, and still to this day, concerned with getting high. But then when you get high, you have to come down. And a lot of times that entails some kind of suffering, especially with alcohol. Speaking of which, I mentioned this again, I was just at the main gate the other day going to the drugstore to get something, and it was St. Patrick's Day. There was not a parking place in sight, and the place was packed. It was completely packed. I didn't know that St. Patrick's Day was a big deal. I just remember when I was a kid, you were supposed to wear green, and they'd pinch you if you didn't wear green or something like that. But the place was packed with drunk teenagers wearing different green paper hats and, their little tip of the old hat to the Irish. But really, it was just an excuse to party down and get really drunk in the middle of the day. Probably many of them ditching their classes to go party. And there's, down there's places that sell alcohol, no problem. They don't care how old you are. As long as you got the money to buy it, you're okay. And I was actually a little taken aback and shocked by this, because I didn't know that St. Patrick's Day was a thing where all the college students got drunk. I had no idea. It wasn't a thing when I was in college. Of course, when I was in college, every day was a party. But I didn't know that was such a big thing, and it really caught me off guard, by surprise. And one of the pharmacists that's in the drugstores is kind of a friend of mine. She used to work over here before they closed the CVS here, and real slow. So, time to talk and hang out. That's a very busy CVS, the one over by the university. And I said, did you know what was going on out there? It's like, place is packed with tons of drunk teenagers. She goes, really? You had no idea. So I had no idea either. But I realized that, this is it. Eat, drink, and be merry and enjoy. now, because tomorrow we may die. So, and everyone, of course, will face that. And Prabhupada brings up this saying here about the brahmachari. You may die. You may die now. Because what is the brahmachari? He's doing like austerities and penances for self-realization, so that when the point of death comes and he goes back to Godhead. That's his focus in life. Theoretically, all you brahmacharis out there. So why suffer? Just go back to Godhead now. You're already ready. So that's the benediction. You just may die. Seems like a strange benediction. You die. You know, Prabhupada tells about, you know, the vulture is flying high in the sky looking for some carrion to feast on. And he sees a cow on the ground. The cow's, you know, nice and healthy, fully alive. Cow's munching on the grass. And the vulture says, cow, I curse you to die. He curses him to die because the vulture lives on the dead bodies of animals laying on the ground. So what is the power of his curse? The power of his curse is zero. I curse you to die. You die. So anyone who hates somebody, they say, I wish you would die. But they have no power to do that. That curse has no factual power. Like right now, there are many people cursing the President of the United States. May you die immediately. Because you're inconveniencing everyone. And no one is happy with this rascaldom. So, but what is the power of that curse? Now, the guy who gets the gun and takes the right proper shot with the scope and a little bit of training from the military, perhaps, he can do that. But everyone else's curse is of no value. So that's the vulture cursing the cow. I curse you to die. Sometimes people try to curse the devotees. But they have no power to curse. I told this story before. We were back in the 80s, the Krishna Fest party headed by Gunagrai Maharaj. Every day we had a permit to be in the walkway, what they call the mall, which goes between the United States Capitol building and the Lincoln Memorial. There's a strip of park there in between the two streets on the side. And that's very famous as the mall. There's some grass, there's some trees, there's gravel walkways. And so the gravel walkway just adjacent to the Air and Space Museum is a very busy place. The Air and Space Museum, the National Air and Space Museum, is open 365 days a year, and it is the most visited museum in the world. And at certain times of year, especially in the spring and the fall, there are unlimited numbers of busloads of junior high and high schoolers coming there on their field trips, coming from Ohio and Illinois and Pennsylvania and Maryland and Virginia, from all around New York State. And there's a lot of kids there. So they come there to see the moon rock and, the space capsule that John Glenn was in and all that kind of stuff. And then there they meet the chanting party of the devotees with our electric kirtan band, with Gunagrahi Maharaj on the drum cat, which is a pad that has pressure sensitive areas on it, and each one has a different sound. So it's snare and bass drum and cymbals and everything. And then the devotees would be dancing. The brahmacharis would go out and dance in front, and then all the kids would dance, and we would have dance contests. And the winner would get like a free perfection of yoga, first prize. So sometimes we'd have 50, 75, 100 teenagers dancing and chanting. And we would tell them that the parameters of the dance contest was whoever danced the best and chanted the loudest would win the prize. So they're all competing to chant the Hare Krishna mantra very loudly. We had a sign, printed sign with the mantra. So it's amazing. You get 100 kids dancing. It's fantastic. It has potency. And it's a wonder to behold. And then also we had a book table there. And the interested kids would come up and they want to talk a little philosophy or what are you guys all about? These would be these fresh-faced, bright-faced youth, the flower of your country, Prabhupada called the youth, who are relatively unspoiled by sense gratification due to their youth, appreciating and inquiring about Krishna consciousness. So one time I was at the table and this boy came up. He was not one of the tourists. He was a local guy, a real jaded guy, and he was what we call, a Christian demon kind of guy. And he goes, "Satan, I rebuke thee." And I thought that was so hilarious that he's using biblical language as if he were Jesus casting out the demons of the saintly devotees. And it's just so ironic. And I said to him, I said, "You're not Jesus." I said, "And you're not rebuking anybody. And I doubt that you're even a real Christian in terms of your life and following the teachings of the Bible. You're just using that as a cover for your own low-class, sinful life of sense gratification. And you stamp that Christian stamp on you, but you're not a real Christian. You don't follow the teachings of Jesus at all." And there was a whole bunch of kids around the table. They wanted to hear what was going on. And then they all said, "Yeah, you're not a real Christian." And then they grabbed the guy and they just dragged him off. They were all chastising him. And it was so hilarious. It was so hilarious. They those kids were pretty smart. They knew what was bogus and what was real, apparently, because they didn't like this guy at all, proclaiming out of his pride and arrogance to be like a big spiritualist when actually he was just a real rascal. "Yeah, you're not a real Christian at all." The poor guy was annihilated by these kids. And it was such a wonderful experience. Of course, there were many wonderful experiences preaching there on the mall, but this one really has stuck in my mind because it was so funny and so hilarious. And I didn't have to do anything. I just let them take him away and destroy him. Didn't take much of an argument at all. They were convinced. Something like this happened to me one other time too. Ramapad Swami used to engage me when I was a brahmachari in Boston. And going out, there's a lot of universities and colleges there in Boston. And the temple was right downtown in Back Bay, in the area where there were near where a lot of schools were. And so there's one college there, it's called Emerson. Small liberal arts private school. And most of the kids that go there are A, rich, and B, smart. So I went to this religion class, but then there was just one guy in the class, and he had really long hair and sunglasses. And the school was so liberal, they let him smoke in the classroom. And he was smoking and annoying the heck out of everybody else in the classroom, who were all bright-faced, rich, smart kids. And this guy was like the bad apple, but he was also the Christian guy who everybody thought was really obnoxious. It was clear. As soon as he opened his mouth, I saw the look on everybody else's face. "Yeah, well, what about Jesus, man?" And I said, the teachings of Jesus are very nice. I said, "Unfortunately, you appear to be someone who doesn't follow any of them at all. It's clear from your demeanor, and your lack of cleanliness and your obnoxious smoking, which everyone in this class hates that. It's, it's clear you pollute in the whole room. And then the whole classroom erupted into applause because it was kind of like socially unacceptable to chastise the guy for being so obnoxious. That's the way everyone felt. And so because I spoke up and said that, Krishna gave me those words to say, and then they all loved it and they all clapped. And the guy was like, he slumped down in his chair and he put a cigarette out and he was like totally defeated. And then after the class was over, they all came up to me, hey, pat me on the back. That was great. We loved that. And I was probably not much more than 1 or 2 years older than most of them at the time. So they appreciated that. So Krishna consciousness is so nice that even though the truth may not always be palatable to a particular person or even to everyone, still it is our duty to assimilate this understanding, this philosophy that's presented in the Bhagavatam, for example, very heavy subject matter, the death is coming, and people don't know where they're going, but they're kind of afraid because they know all what they've done and they're thinking they may have to pay some price, and they're correct. That subtle understanding is there. That fear is there. Fear of death. What is fear of death? The fear of being punished. It's not fear of being annihilated. It's a fear of continuing on and being punished and being called to account for one's nefarious activities, whether they be, high crimes or small misdemeanors, whatever the case. For most people, it's, a lot of small misdemeanors. But some people, there's high crimes. That's the definition in our government of an impeachable offense for high crimes and misdemeanors. I think misdemeanors were more serious back in those days than they are now. So, in the back of the mind of the conditioned soul is the fear of having to be called to account for one's misdeeds and pay some price of suffering, which is not desirable by any stretch. So those who are self-realized, who gain a foothold in Krishna consciousness and begin to grasp this philosophy, then we should, without fear ourselves, just preach the truth as we understand it, as is given by Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra. That may not make us the most popular group on planet Earth. You guys are always talking about death. When the person who asked me, how's it going? I replied, oh, it's good except for birth, death, old age, and disease. He said, you're just like a parrot. I said, no, a parrot, you may teach a parrot to say, Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. You can teach a parrot like that. The Prabhu says, well, you grab the parrot by the throat, squawk, squawk. Oh, he's afraid of death. Whereas a devotee, if you grab him by the throat and he's fixing to die, Hare Krishna. He's chanting the holy name in preparation for his next destination. So there's a big difference between the parrot and the devotee. So the devotee, he understands birth, death, old age, and disease. This is all around us. It's everywhere. This is what's happening in the material world. These are the real problems of life. One shouldn't be like the ostrich. What does the ostrich do when it sees a real dangerous situation? It sticks its head down and buries it in the ground, in the dirt. So here's the danger. I put my head down, I don't see it. So the danger, that's how he deals with the danger. But that's no solution, especially because an ostrich is a rather fast running bird. He can run away pretty good. That's a better solution to some impending danger. But these miseries that are foisted upon us by the material nature of death, old age, and disease, they're the real problems. These are the impediments to our becoming happy, to our enjoyment. So rather than just blow it off and don't think about it, let us inquire, well, what is the solution to these problems? And the solution is to become elevated in spiritual consciousness and to understand Krishna Tattva, the truth of Krishna consciousness and of everything in this world in relation to understanding Krishna. And then, according to Bhagavad Gita, you punch your ticket home. You don't take birth again. You never have to see birth and death again in this world if you are realized in Krishna consciousness. So that is an actual solution. That is the only solution to the problems. You certainly can't invent some pill that'll make you live forever. Or Prabhupada mentioned some Russian scientists. I'm not sure, there must have been something in the news back in the day about that. Yes, we are now going to solve the problem of death in which people can live forever and enjoy. But no one lives forever, and no one stays young forever. Although Krishna, when he stayed on this earth for 125 years, but the whole time he never aged past as being a beautiful 16-year-old in the full bloom of youth. That's called Nava-yovana. He's eternally youthful. He doesn't age. He doesn't die. Prabhupada says you never see a picture of Krishna with gray hair and thick glasses trying to read something. Nothing like that. He appears to age from childhood to youth as part of his pastimes, but then he never ages beyond 16 years. And when he was fighting the battle of Kurukshetra, he was one of the big Kshatriyas on the battlefield. His great Kshatriya, great fighter, defeated many. He never lost. He never lost a fight. He was over 100 years old, but he's still looking pretty good. Not like Jimmy Buffett, and I think wrote one song, "Just don't look good naked anymore." The middle-aged rocker looking in the mirror like, that youth is gone. The power to enjoy is gone, as Prabhupada writes here in the purport. That stuff downstairs, it don't work no more. It's no good. Like a fella said to me one time, at that time I was probably about, this would have been about 2010. I would have been around 50 something. And I was selling jewelry in a mall, in a kiosk in the mall, temporary leasing for Christmas in a mall in Oklahoma City. And there was another fella, his wife had a booth and he was helping her set up and stuff like that. And he was in his 70s. And they were from Texas. And he said, he was giving me advice on life, right? He said, "Don't get old. It's no good." And I was amused by that, but I also appreciated that, yes, you are correct. It is no good, but the only alternative to not allowing yourself to get old is to die prematurely. That's no good either. So, good old boy wisdom, it's no good, don't get old. And he was suffering in various ways, various health issues, lack of energy, and things that happen to one in old age. So the wisdom of the conditioned soul spoken by the common man in the street, so to speak, yes, it's a problem. So what are you going to do about it? Are you going to solve the problem? Are you interested to solve the problem? Or you just want to be like a fool and just enjoy your senses until death just takes you away and then sends you off to some kind of hellish punishment and then another body, which is no guarantee that that body is human body either. Is that what you're going to do about it? Like the ostrich, just hide your head in the sand? Or just, I was visiting my father and my stepmother, and they were in their 70s, and my stepmother said to me, you know, they had just gotten some new cable service or something, some new, and a big TV. And then my stepmother said, TV's our life. I was like, wow. Yeah. And I was thinking, yeah, that the TV is your life. It's also your death. I didn't say that. I was, I'm polite to them. You can't just shove the philosophy down their throat. They can't take it. But yeah, TV is our life, and the TV is your death. And you're just wasting away. Again, Jimmy Buffett, just wasting away here in Margaritaville, right? Just piddling your life away in intoxication and illusion and darkness, and gradually the miseries of old age and disease are wiping out all your happiness, and soon death will come knocking on your door and take you away. And there's nothing you can do about that, the march of time and those events. But what you can do is find an ultimate solution to repeated birth and death, which is there in the Krishna consciousness movement. The devotees ultimately are not afraid of death. Let death come. No problem. I'm going back to Krishna. I'm chanting Hare Krishna. I'm not in the illusion that I'm this body. I know I'm the eternal soul. And my focus is on hearing and chanting and remembering Krishna. And that will do me good. That's the ultimate good that can be done. Instead of this narration about King Paranjana, how he's wasting his life in enjoyment, and then he will be attacked by Chandavega, the great criminal of death, who takes one's life and then sends one on to another, the next destination, which is not a destination of one's choosing. But you can choose your destination by being Krishna conscious. You can choose the destination of going back to Krishna. And that's a wonderful destination. That's the best destination. No bad weather, no bad government, no irritating family members, obnoxious people who one is thrust into life with and doesn't really care to associate with, but has no choice. And what choice does a kid have? Once he runs away, you're in that family and you're kind of stuck there. So what can you do? It's not like I choose these people to be my siblings and my cousins and my parents and my relatives. And then for the most part, they're like a bunch of nuts. At least mine were. Your mileage may vary. Maybe you have much better birth and much better. But I remember all these aunts and uncles and stuff, and they were really a bunch of characters. Just living life very much like external to who their real identity as a spirit soul was, and just carried away by that. And then one by one, they all pass away. Okay, so we stop here. Thank you very much. Questions, comments, realizations? He was closer.
I think it's nice that you could do the Harinam at that space place, because this space is such a waste of money. I mean,
It was unbelievable
Yeah.
how good the preaching was. It was unbelievable how fantastic all the teenagers were, including, 7th graders, 8th graders, on up through high school. How intelligent and bright-faced and how wonderful they were and receptive they were. And many of them really, really loved their experience of Krishna consciousness. So how was your trip to Washington, D.C. with your class, honey? Oh, it was great. We chanted Hare Krishna and we danced and I got this book and it was so much fun. We had a great time. The parents were like, what? What are they doing to my kids? But it was wonderful. And it went on for a few years. That was a very special time. Yeah. Yeah.
I just saw like an ad for a roommate yesterday, and it said like what they wanted in a roommate, and the main point was that they wanted their prospective roommate, their only hobby, to be watching TV. And I just thought that's so sad that not only is that presumably your only hobby, but that now you're like, canvassing for a housemate.
Misery loves company.
Yeah.
yeah, right.
I thought it was very sad.
What was that on Facebook?
It was on Craigslist. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
you're pursuing the roommates wanted on Craigslist?
No, I just happened upon it, but
In the spare room.
Anyway, yeah. You're gonna rent out space in your room, man. The biggest room of all.
I'm advertising for a roommate.
Yeah. Okay, have to get Tsunami to preach to you a little more. Of course, everyone needs a little extra income, right?
Yeah. When I rent out that space under my bed.
Yeah, right.
Okay, now I have to take the mic to Sureshwar. By the way, this is Sureshwar, who gave the class yesterday, and the title on the YouTube said, Dhirodatta. But I explained to Lalita, I'm here to tell you that this is the real Dhirodatta.
Or are you Sureshwar? Well, don't we, in a sense, actually choose our parents and our, because karma daiva trena, according to our
You
karma.
earn it, but it's not like your first choice. Oh, I want this one. No, you get thrown in there by your karma.
Yeah, by your choice. By your
Yeah, but it's not a direct choice.
your desire to enjoy the material world. I was just hearing Prabhupada say this to a guy in Australia, because he was saying, we're not responsible. Prabhupada said, oh yes.
Well, you are responsible, but it's not like a free choice. I freely choose to be in this family. No, you're thrust into that family pretty much against your will. You don't have any choice in the matter. You don't have any say-so. Okay, pick a family out of the database. No, there's nothing like that. Choose your ideal family. I want to live in the family with a big house, horses and whatever. But no, you don't get to choose like that. You may end up with that due to your karma, but the particular personalities whom you're thrown in with, you have no say in the matter.
Yeah, or as Prabhupada says in one purport, the Lord fulfills the desire of the living entity to the extent that he deserves, but not to the extent that he may covet.
Right, not to the extent that he may desire.
Yeah. Okay, got it.
Okay, thank you all very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Yeah.